Hello and welcome to this free immigration help channel. On this channel I provide a free immigration advice, answer your immigration related questions and show how to fill out applications and to follow up with the process and stuff like that. And I've got a lot of different from different users. I got a lot of requests regarding the interview whenever it comes to the asylum application. I have made a video on this channel on how to apply for the asylum status, on how to write the statement properly, what to expect, but I wanted to make a video and concentrate a little bit more specifically on the interview, because if you are maybe you did not apply yet, or maybe you already did apply for your asylum status and you're waiting for the interview. Asylum interview is probably going to be one of the most important interviews that you are going to take. That's if you are, doing the asylum process, because it is really that determining point. If you get approved, if you get the approval after the asylum interview, then that's it. Your asylum status is granted. However, if you're not approved, if your asylum request is denied, then you become subject of removal proceedings and your case goes to the deportation. So again, everything becomes a little bit much more complicated, and now in order for you to continue your asylum case, you have to file your case to court and now present it in front of the immigration judge. So obviously everything gets more complicated. Most likely you will need an attorney because now you are in court, and it's very hard. It is fairly simple enough for anybody to do everything that is required to do, to fill out the applications and do stuff like that before it gets to court. And if it gets to court, then it becomes more complicated, and most of the times you do need an attorney in order to present your case in court. So you see how it's a very determining point. Asylum interview is very important, so that's why I wanted to make a separate video to talk about it and kind of help you prepare for it. So before the interview, we are assuming, obviously we're talking, just to clarify, you have arrived to the US. You have applied for the asylum. You have received a notice from the USCIS that application was accepted, right? You may or may not have completed your biometrics appointment. You may or may not have received your EAD and or social security card. Now, I wanted to clarify that just in case, so that you don't, expect something, your asylum interview scheduled if you have not completed the certain steps that are required before your asylum interview is scheduled, obviously. All right, and received your interview notice, obviously the very important one. Okay, so the interview setting. Let's talk a little bit about the interview setting. Asylum interviews that take place in USCIS field offices. I wouldn't try to look up the actual office, the field office where your asylum interview is going to take, because not all field offices conduct asylum interviews. If you are curious, however, you can go and check it out, because you can find all the field offices, USCIS field offices, on uscis.gov website, just kind of to know where they are. Asylum interview will be conducted by the immigration officer, most likely in his or her office, and it's a really basic office setting. A desk, a chair, a computer. There might be a webcam if the immigration officer is recording video, but they will be recording the audio definitely. The interview is formal, is very similar to a job interview. The interview will be recorded, like I have already mentioned. If you applied with a dependent, you both will be interviewed together as well as separately. So if you are, for example, applying with your wife, you will be doing the interview sitting together next to your wife talking directly to the immigration officer, but then at some point of the interview the immigration officer might ask you to leave the room and then talk to just her, and then the same he can do to her and ask her to leave the room and just talk to you. So be prepared. It's really nothing. It's a usual practice and it happens pretty much most all the times. That is, if you're applying with a dependent. Okay, so the interview beginning. The USCIS representative will introduce himself, herself, obviously. They will explain the purpose of the interview. They will inform you that the interview is being recorded, and like I said, it's definitely, the audio is definitely going to be recorded, but it also might be the video as well as audio. They might explain you a brief layout of the interview. They might also give you a brief overview of the process after the interview. So most likely it's not going to be in the beginning of the interview, though. It's going to be the end of the interview, where they will say that, okay, we're done with our interview, blah blah blah, what's next to expect, you can expect this and that. Okay, they will ask you to make a sworn statement on record. So they will ask you to raise your right hand and say, I am this and that, and I, solemnly swear, or whatever, that everything I'm going to say in this interview is going to be truth. They might ask you a few clarification questions regarding your application. So obviously your immigration officer, whoever you will be doing your interview with, they will already have your application and all your evidence that you have submitted reviewed before the interview. So if they do have quick questions, if the handwriting is not clear, or they do not understand what this evidence is for, they might ask you really quickly, like, can you take a look at this, make sure this is correct, make sure this is correct. Alright, interview questions, probably the most important slide in this video. So, the types of questions. Why are you claiming the asylum? Why are you claiming the asylum now? So for example, why didn't you claim it, let's say, if you've been in the country for the past 6 months, why didn't you claim it earlier? Why are you claiming it now? Why are you claiming the asylum in the US and not in another country? So for example, if you're coming from, let's say, some country in Europe and you're claiming the asylum, why didn't you claim it in some other country in Europe, maybe neighboring that country, somewhere over there, or another one. Obviously there are a lot of countries out there, so why are you specifically claiming it in the US? Questions about your story to establish the truthfulness of the said story. Questions about your story to establish the valid reasons for your claim according with the asylum definition, which is the persecution based on religious beliefs, political beliefs, certain affiliations. Questions about specific details from your story. And when I say specific, it can be really, really, really specific. You're telling your story about a certain event. What time that event happened? What were you wearing? What happened before that? Very, very specific details. Questions about your dependents, if any, and or your relatives and friends who might be still back in that country. For example, if you came here in the United States and you're claiming the asylum and you have relatives who are back there, how are they doing over there? Are they also being persecuted? Questions about the future. Something like, what would you do if you got your, when you get your asylum approved? What are you going to do? What is your future plans in the United States? So as you can see, all of these questions, they are there to check everything you say in the story, right? Verify that information, verify the truthfulness of that, to establish the truthfulness of the story, to establish that you do qualify for the asylum. Like I said, you have to be persecuted in your home country. And of course, certain questions to make sure that you did not wait too long to apply for the asylum, and if you did, why you waited for so long to apply for the asylum, and again, why didn't you apply in another country? If you couldn't have, why you couldn't have, and stuff like that. Be prepared. The questions are going to be, some of the questions are going to be very specific. Questions are not necessarily going to be tricky or anything like that. The goal of the immigration officer is not to sabotage you in any way or make sure that you make a mistake and mess up somewhere in the interview so that they can say, haha, I caught you. No, that's not how it works. It is really to establish that you do qualify for asylum, and your claim, everything goes along with the evidence that you provided, everything that you said on the application, and stuff like that. Okay, interview tips from the experience. Now, I always say the disclaimer, I'm not an immigration attorney in any way, or some kind of legal representatives. So this is not a legal advice. This is just from the experience of, having many people go through asylum interviews and telling me how it went. Okay, dress neatly and look professional. Now, probably should go without saying, but I personally seen people come in for their asylum interviews, for their naturalization interviews, wearing t-shirts and shorts. That, on top of being disrespectful, it also shows that it's really not that important to you. So make sure you're wearing a nice shirt. If you have a tie, wear a tie. Nice pants, decent shoes. I'm not saying nice, expensive shirt, pants, and stuff like that, obviously. But just try to look as presentable as possible. Which also brings us to the next one: be well groomed. If you have too much beard going on, shave. If your hair is out of control, brush them, stuff like that. Take a shower. Again, I know it might sound funny to you, but people really do not take things like this seriously, and it's just one of the things that shows the immigration officer that is important to you. Now, speaking of important, make sure to arrive an hour earlier. And an hour earlier, I know it might sound like a lot of time earlier, but here's the thing. First of all, you want to make sure that you go in, you pass through the security, because in every field office that I've personally been myself to, there is a security checkpoint where you have to take out everything from your pockets, you have to take off your shoes, kind of like in the airport, and go through the metal detectors. So you have to do that, right? Then you have to go and you have to check in with the front desk, show them, your interview notice, make sure that they check you in. So you do need, it's not just you come in and you're right in the office of the immigration officer and you're ready to do the interview. No, there are certain things you need to do. So that will probably take you 15, might be up to 30 minutes, right? I've seen some asylum interviews scheduled because it's not just one person. They usually schedule a lot of people for one day for the asylum interviews. And I've seen field offices have a line outside, so people could not find parking. People were standing in line to get into the building to pass the security checkpoint. So if you arrived late, if you arrived 15 minutes earlier and you cannot find the parking for 10 minutes and then you have to go through that security, you will be late 100%. So you don't want to be late. And another thing regarding this arriving earlier, what that allows you to do is, first of all, not rush and concentrate on your thoughts, stay focused, keep yourself together, because obviously you're going to be nervous. It's a very important event in your life. And whenever you do pass that security checkpoint and you check in, whenever you're sitting and waiting there in the area and you see all the people who are, getting ready for their interview. You see all the immigration officers coming out and taking people one by one into their offices. You kind of get more familiar with that surrounding, right? That environment, and it helps you to calm down. It helps you to get over that nervousness a little bit more compared to when you just rush in and you just straight go everywhere and just straight go into the interview. Okay, let's get to the next one. Prepare a chronological timeline of all the dates and events in your story, and your story meaning your personal statement that you have made for your asylum interview. It's very important because obviously you will have a lot of dates. For example, when did that one event, even if it was just one event, when did that one event happen? What time did it happen? What date did it happen? You must have filed something, some police reports or maybe prosecutor's office report or something like that. When did that happen? When did you hear back from them? When did you decide that you cannot stay there anymore because you're scared? When did you leave the country? When did you come into the United States? When did you file for asylum? All of these events, you want to make sure you list them in a chronological order just to have it in front of you. Not because you are going to forget, or you probably will forget. You don't want to skip something and not say something that is very important, not mention it in the interview. So just having that in front of you will make it much easier to go along your story. And which brings us to the next one, is go over your initial statement and the application several times. Again, it's not because you need to learn, you need to memorize something. People who write fake statements, they need to memorize something. No, because you want to have that map, that mental map, whenever you are doing that interview with the officer. And because your story, the officer might also know your story from the statement that you sent and from the application, but nevertheless they did not experience those events, so they only know what they read in the story, and now they're gonna know more from what you're telling them. And you still need to provide structured, not just like random, okay, so this happened and then this happened, and then going back 2 years that happened, and then going forward 3 years this happened, so that you're not all over the place. Okay, it's okay to be nervous and be emotional. And when I say emotional, being sad, crying. Most of the asylum officers are considerate and understanding, and I've heard a lot of stories of husband and wife crying during the interview, and the immigration officer going out and bringing her some water, some tissue. So they are human beings. They're considerate people. They're not gonna be there trying to torture the information out of you and just be cold. But that brings us to another one. They will. This is not the other one, but the other point that I wanted to make, which is not on this slide, is that be prepared for tough questions. Right? Be prepared for personal and maybe even invasive questions. It's a part of it. That brings us to the next one, though. Be honest. Be honest on your interview, meaning that if you do not remember something, it's okay, not to remember something, because if the immigration officer is asking you some very, very specific details about your case, about the events that happened, obviously it might have happened 6 months ago, it might have happened 5 years ago, we don't know. So if it happened a long time ago, people forget. So instead of trying to come up with something, just be honest and say, I don't remember very well, I think it was like that, but keep that in mind. And be polite. The officer is just doing her job. Like I said, some questions, they might appear intrusive, very direct, very personal, and different cultures, different ethnic backgrounds have different levels of tolerance to very personal questions, and it's very understandable. For example, where I'm coming from, in my culture, it's not polite to ask very direct, very intrusive questions. But try to kind of put yourself outside of this frame and look at it from the perspective that the officer is just doing their job. And in fact, they want to help you. They are putting their time, they are working with you, they are asking you these questions to establish that, reason for asylum, for your asylum claim. And, because obviously they have to do whatever filing they have to do after they're done with the interview to their superiors and say, okay, so this person said this and this and that, it goes along with their statement, they do qualify for the asylum, so I do recommend them, or not recommend if obviously it doesn't. So you get the point. So at the end of the day, follow the tips. Hopefully this were helpful. If you have any questions, you can definitely ask me in the comments below, and I will be very happy to answer them for you. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.